Hey guys, before we get started with today's episode, I just want to take a brief moment to talk about the sponsor for today's segment, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. They give you all the tools you need to edit and spruce up your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on all major platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can even start making money right off the bat because Anchor doesn't require any minimum listenership. The best part about this all is it is completely free. It is what I use to create my podcast. You can download Anchor on the App Store or go online to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the first episode of Financial Friday on my new podcast, Reach the Stars. I'm your host, Dylan Caldwell. Before I begin, I would like to make a quick comment about the podcast. Starting next Monday, you will see the first Motivational Monday segment, where I take a motivational quote, break it down, and explain how it applies to us in everyday life. I won't be starting the What to Do Wednesday segment until I begin getting questions from the listener. In case there is any question on what this segment is, it's just an advice column. Anything you need on an outside perspective, you can send in to me, and I will answer your question while keeping you anonymous. With that all taken care of, let's begin the episode. This week, we are going to begin reading Dave Ramsey's Complete Guide to Money. In case you don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he owns a finance business where he helps normal people like you and me get out of our difficult financial situations. He hosts a class nationally called Financial Peace University, which I highly recommend if you are in need of in-person financial advice. If you would like to follow along with the book, I will keep you updated on the page numbers and recap at the end of the read. Otherwise, sit back and I will do all the work for you. Alright, so we're starting on Chapter 1, Super Saving, Common Sense for Your Dollars and Cents. So we're going to skip the introduction and dedication and all that, and just jump straight into the book. And if you're following along, that's chapter 1, page 5. So yeah, let's begin. The water was so hot. It was almost burning my face, but I could barely feel it. All I really felt were the tears that wouldn't stop coming as I stood in the shower, crying like a baby. One thought kept repeating itself over and over in my head. How in the world did I end up here? Maybe that's a question you've asked yourself a time or two. At that time, I was coming off a winning streak. I was a wonder kid of real estate, still in my 20s. I had built up a $4 million portfolio in just a few years. My wife, Sharon, and I have been having all kinds of fun. Fancy jewelry, luxury cars, exotic vacations. We had it all. And then we lost it. My success was a lie. It was propped up on a mountain of debt, and one day, one bank decided to knock me off that mountain. Over the next few years, that mountain of debt turned into an avalanche that just about wiped out me and my family. We lost everything, and I stood in the shower every morning with tears and dread, knowing what I was going to have to face that day. I had played the money game, and I had lost. For me, hitting rock bottom was the wake-up call I needed to get my financial act together. From that point on, I was on a quest to find out everything I could about God's and Grandma's way of handling money. And for more than 20 years now, I have been on a crusade to spread the news about what I have found. Money really isn't that complicated, but most of what we hear in the media and from the highbrow financial geniuses is just plain wrong. If you really want to win with money, you just need to get your arms around a handful of simple, repeatable concepts. The concepts are simple, but that doesn't mean that the process is easy. It's not. That's because money is not just about math. It's about behavior. Personal finance is only 20% head knowledge. The other 80%, the bulk of the issue, is behavior. And it's our behaviors with money that can get us into the biggest trouble or lead us into the biggest successes. Behavior is the key to the whole deal, and we'll unpack how that plays out through all these different areas as we work through this book. for years. I have taught people a process for getting out of debt and building wealth that I call the baby steps. I talk about the baby steps on my radio show, in my live events, all through our Financial Peace University class, and I've even written a book, The Total Money Makeover, that walks you step by step through the 7-step process. The book you're holding right now, though, is different. We'll talk about the baby steps a lot, and we'll check each step off the list as we work through this information, but this book is more of a practical, hands-on guide for navigating your way through some of the details like saving, investing, mutual funds, insurance, real estate, and all the other important parts of your financial plan that a lot of people either forget or ignore. I'm not going to repeat everything you may have already read in the Total Money Makeover, but we are going to stick to the baby steps as home base. Like I said, I've been teaching people this stuff for 20 years, and I know the baby steps work. I'm not going to change everything I've been teaching for 2 decades just to sell a new book. Basically, the baby steps are your roadmap to win with money. Having a goal is great, but you need to know more than just where you want to end up. You may need to know how to get from point A to point B. You might say, I know my target. I want to have $1 million in my retirement account by the time I turn 50. That's a great goal. But if you're sitting at age 25 with 2 car loans, no savings, maxed out credit cards, a dead-end job, and no real plan, you're not going to make it. You need some step-by-step directions to get you where you want to go. So let's make a quick look at the 7 baby steps. You'll see these markers come up as we work through this book and the Financial Peace University class. Baby step 1. Put $1,000 in a beginner emergency fund. $500 if your income is under $20,000 per year. Baby step 2. Pay off all debt using the debt snowball. Baby step 3. Put 3 to 6 months of expenses into savings as a full emergency fund. Baby step 4. Invest 15% of your household income into Roth IRAs and pre-tax retirement plans. Baby step 5. Begin college funding for your kids. Baby step 6. Pay off your home early. Baby step 7. Build wealth and give. The baby steps work because of focus and priority. It's like eating an elephant. You can't do it all in one bite. But if you break it down into smaller steps and pour all of your attention, energy, and passion into one thing at a time, you can do anything. This is where we are headed. But as we get there, we'll deal with all the other details that sneak up on us and derail our financial plan. Not anymore. This book is your guide through all things money, from the biggest deals to the smallest details. I want you to read it. Work through all the lessons if you're in the Financial Peace University class, and then refer to this book often as you hit new milestones in your financial walk. You ready? Then let's get started. Priority number 1, save money. It took a near meltdown of the entire economy to get most people's attention about saving money. In the decade leading up to the 2008 financial mess, Americans flirted with a negative savings rate. That means, at times, the average American was spending more than he was making. All the money came in, and all the money went out, and then some. We were high on debt, high-risk loans, and crazy mortgages, and most people didn't have anything in the bank to catch them up if they took a fall. Gallup did a survey in the decade leading up to the 2008 crisis and found that only 32% of Americans would be able to cover a $5,000 emergency without borrowing money. It doesn't take much to add up to $5,000 either. A car wreck, roof repair, or medical problem could hit $5,000 pretty quickly. And when that happens, 7 out of 10 respondents to the survey said they'd be charging up credit cards, taking out loans, or hitting up mom and dad for the money. They had no buffer between them and life. Trust me, that is no way to live. I've been there. I've felt that pressure, and there is no way I'm ever going back. So let's get started with the first step on the journey. Baby step 1, Put $1,000 in a beginner emergency fund. This is your first priority, and you've got to do it fast, today, right now. Most people can come up with $1,000 in a month if they make it a priority. If you're making less than 20 grand a year, you can cut this down to $500, but get it done. Have a garage sale this weekend. Eat rice and beans every meal for the next month. Work extra hours. Do whatever it takes, but hit this goal fast. In the grand scheme of life, $1,000 is not a lot of money, but this is often the hardest baby step for most people to take for one reason. It requires a change. A lot of the people I talk to every day have never had $1,000 in the bank before. When we start the process by putting that cash aside in the bank just for emergencies, they have to make a decision. Am I going to actually take these steps? Am I done living the way I've been living? Am I willing to sacrifice to win? That's no big deal for a lot of people, but I've seen tons of men and women face this decision and just walk away. They can't do it. Something in their spirits just won't let them mentally and emotionally make a commitment to change the behaviors that led them into a mess. We don't always like change, do we? Sometimes we're like a baby sitting in a poopy diaper. We think, sure it stinks, but it's warm and it's mine. We get defensive of our mess even if it's not working. So when I tell people the first thing they need to do is put $1,000 in the bank and not touch it, it can be a deal breaker. It requires you to look in the mirror and say, you're the problem. When you do that emotionally, you'll start to win with money. We need to deal with something before we get too far into the issue of saving money. I want you to have a big pile of money in the bank. I want you to be able to buy nice things, cover emergencies without stress and panic, and have some cash on hand to bless other people. But every time I talk about savings and building wealth, someone always comes up to me and says, but if I save money and do the stuff you teach, I'll become one of those evil rich people. That's a total disconnect about how God wants us to handle our money. Some people have a broken mindset when it comes to wealth. They think about saving money as if somehow it's evil or wrong. That's a huge misreading of Scripture. The Bible doesn't say that money is the root of all evil. It says that love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money is amoral. It doesn't have morals. It's not good, it's not bad. It's the love of money that's the problem. And that's a human problem, not a money problem. Money is like a brick. I can take a brick and throw it through someone's window. Or I can take a brick and build a church or a hospital. The brick doesn't care. It's just a brick. But when you put it into the hands of a human being, it takes on the character of that person. It does whatever the person holding it wants to do. But we get confused about this. Sometimes we think, oh, that person has a big pile of bricks, so he must be evil. And that guy doesn't have any bricks, so he must be good. But it's just a pile of bricks. Why are we putting morals and values on it? I have met some rich people who are total greedy jerks, and so have you. I've also met some poor people who are total greedy jerks, and so have you. On the other hand, I've met some rich people who are some of the nicest, kindest, godliest people on the planet, and some poor people who are just as great. And I bet you have too. It's not about the money. You're not bad if you have some, and you're not good if you don't. It's just bricks. There are 3 basic reasons to save money. First, we save for an emergency fund. Second, we save for purchases. And third, we save for wealth building. Purchases and wealth building are fun, but we can't do any of that until we cover the basics, the emergency fund. This is a savings account set aside and never touched except for emergencies. You'll need to define what makes up an emergency for your family too. Let me give you a clue. A new leather sofa or a vacation is not an emergency. The emergency fund is your protection against life's unexpected events, and you're going to have a lot of them throughout your lifetime. They're not really unexpected when you think about it. You know they're coming. You just don't know when, what, or how much. But you can still be ready. We already said that baby step 1 is a beginner emergency fund. That just gives you a little wiggle room as you work through baby step 2, which is getting out of debt. We'll cover that in chapter 4, dumping debt. Once you're out of debt, you go back to the emergency fund and fill it up. Baby step 3, 3 to 6 months of expenses and savings. Notice that we're talking about expenses, not income. The goal here is to figure out your budget, how much it costs to keep your household running for a month. How much would you need to meet all of your obligations and pay your bills if your income suddenly dried up? Then put 3 to 6 months of that into the bank. Then we get to the investing chapters. We'll talk about liquidity. That's just a fancy financial term for availability. You want to keep your emergency fund liquid or available when you need it. It's for emergencies, right? That means you won't usually have a week to wait for a bank or investment company to release the funds. You need to have instant access to the account. However, do not think for a second that you can just keep your emergency fund in your regular checking account. Use that for gas and groceries. If you mix your emergency fund with your other money, it will vanish. That's a little too liquid. It'll leak right out of your account. So you want it available, but separate. You need it off to the side, where you won't accidentally dip into it, but where you can get to the money without any headaches or having to depend on banking hours. I recommend keeping your emergency fund in a simple money market account with a good mutual fund company. This makes it available through basic checking writing privileges or ATM access while keeping it separate from your regular bank account. This kind of account won't pay a great rate, but somewhere in the neighborhood of CD, certificate of deposit rates. But that's okay. Your emergency fund is there for your protection, not to make you money. This is where a lot of people, mostly men, get confused. For most people, the full emergency fund is somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000. That's a lot of money. More money than most people have ever put in the bank. Sometimes math nerds like me will start doing the math and figuring out how much we could be making with a $15,000 investment in a good mutual fund, instead of just having that much money sitting in a money market account. But the emergency fund is not an investment, it's insurance, and insurance costs you money. Years ago, I was doing a book signing and a lady came through the line that was, well, glistening, as we say in the South. It was the middle of the summer, and it was hot outside. You get the idea. I saw her in line a few people back, and she just looked furious. When she finally got up to the table where I was signing, she said, "Dave, I am so mad. I've been doing this stuff. I've been through Financial Peace University. I've worked my tail off to get out of debt and save up to $12,000 in my saving emergency fund. And just now, on the way over here, my truck totally broke down, and I had to get it towed. It's going to cost $1,000 to fix it. I'm so mad." I looked up and said, "What are you mad about? You got $12,000 in the bank. Just fix the car." Her whole face and posture changed. You could see the stress and tension melt off her shoulders. Even though she had a full emergency fund, she hadn't made the connection between unexpected expenses and actually having the cash on hand to handle them. A lot of us, myself included, can understand that. Before I figured out how to handle money and my car broke down, I didn't just have a car crisis. I had a financial crisis too. It wasn't just, my car's broke. It was more like, my car's broke and so am I. Actually, having the money on hand ready to go just to fix a car is an incredible feeling. Even though this lady had done a fabulous job getting out of debt and saving up her emergency fund, it wasn't until she wrote a check for $1,000 car repair that she really understood what it meant to have financial peace. The second basic reason to save money is to make purchases. Since we're not borrowing money anymore, saving up for purchases is kind of a big deal. I teach people to save up for big purchases using the sinking fund approach. For example, let's say your dining room furniture has fallen apart so bad that it can't take one more Thanksgiving dinner. No problem. You'll just run over to the furniture store and pick out a new set. If you're like most Americans, you'll find the one you want, pay the price that's on the sticker, agree to a ripoff. 90 days, same as cash scheme. Sit at the financing desk, signing your life away for an hour, and have your stuff delivered the next day. Problem solved, right? Well, not really. We'll talk about financing and 90 days, same as cash, in Chapter 6. Buyer beware. But for now, here's the deal. A friend of mine in the financing business told me recently that almost 9 out of 10 people who take a 90-day same as cash contract through his company actually do not pay off the loan in 90 days. Even if they've been making payments the whole time, as soon as they cross the 90-day mark, they get charged back interest dating all the way back to the date of purchase. That interest rate is anywhere around 24%. If you were in that deal and carried out those payments an average of 24 months, you'd have monthly payments of $211 and end up paying $5,064 for your $4,000 dining room set. I don't care how good a deal you think you got on that furniture, you got robbed. You went in without a plan, half on impulse, got stuck in debt for 2 years, and ended up adding more than $1,000 to your furniture bill. I've got a better plan. Pay cash. That's pretty old-fashioned, isn't it? Find grandma's cookie jar and stuff some money in it for a few months. That's how people used to pay for things. Here's how I'd recommend buying that furniture. We'll use the sinking fund approach, which means I'm going to figure out how much I need to save, how long I had to save it, and how much that means I'll need to sock away every month. In the furniture example, if I save $211 a month instead of making payments, I could buy that dining room set in 18 months. You say, but Dave, $211 times 18 is only $3,800. That's right. I found that if you walk into a furniture store counting out $100 bills, you'll get a deal. So ultimately, you'll get that furniture with no debt, and you'll save more than $1,000 on it. That's a good plan. What if your kids really got this message early enough and it applies to buying cars? Starting with their first car at age 16, they could go their entire lives without a car payment. Most Americans can't even fathom that. You could retire a multimillionaire just by avoiding car payments. Why don't they teach this in school? The last thing we normally save money for is wealth building. We're going to cover this area in great detail later in Chapter 9, the pinnacle point, and Chapter 10, from fruition to tuition. There, you'll learn all about mutual funds, Roth IRAs, 401ks, annuities, college savings accounts, and everything else you need to know about building wealth. For now, we'll just cover some of the basics. Discipline is key. When it comes to saving money and building wealth over the long haul, nothing is more important than discipline. Putting money away every month, year after year, and over the course of a few decades is a big deal. If you're 22 years old and just starting out in your career, you've probably got more than 40 years until retirement. When you're looking out over a 40, 30, or 20-year span, it's easy to get distracted and let things creep in and steal the dollars you've marked for savings. Discipline is hard. It hurts, and it requires sacrifice. Personally, I don't like discipline, but I love what discipline produces. When I'm disciplined with my diet and exercise, my body feels better. When I'm disciplined in doing the details and caring for my family and friends, my relationships are better. And when I'm disciplined in managing my money, I actually get to build some wealth and enjoy my money. This is really a biblical principle. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Too many people skip the discipline and try to go straight to the enjoyment. That's a recipe for disaster. That's how so many people get hooked on playing for the lottery or go broke in a horrible get-rich-quick scheme that falls apart. Wealth building is a marathon, not a sprint. There really aren't any shortcuts, and that's why most people don't do it. If building wealth were easy, everyone would be rich. What if you squeezed an extra $100 out of your budget every month? If you saved just $100 a month, every month, from age 25 to 65, your working lifetime, at the stock market average return of 12%, you'd retire with more than 1.1 million. You'd be a millionaire with just $100 a month. That's pizza and cable money for most people. Now, is it easy to find $100 in your budget? Sure, most people can figure out how to get an extra dollars out of their budget, but it is easy to do that every month, like clockwork for 40 years? No. As I said before, something else will sneak in and try to take away that money. It takes discipline to stick to your goals, but that little bit of discipline will take you a long way. There's another key to building wealth that can absolutely change your life if you get the concepts early. I'm talking about compound interest. Here's how it works. Some say you have $1,000 in an investment, making 10%. 1 year later, you'd have $1,100 in that account, right? That's your initial $1,000 investment plus 1 year of 10% growth, which is $100. So then you'd have 1,100 sitting in the account for another year at 10%, which would grow to $1,210 during the second year. It just keeps building from there. You'll keep earning 10%, not on the original investment, but on its current value. So every year it's worth more, which means every year you'll earn more. That adds up pretty quick, until eventually the compound interest just goes nuts. That's a great place to be. I made this point in my first book, Financial Peace, using the example of Ben and Arthur. Believe it or not, the guy who only saved 8 years with a total investment of only $16,000 beat the guy who saved for 39 years and invested $76,000. Ben came out far ahead, $700,000 ahead, even though he saved fewer years and less money. Why? Because he started earlier. Because of compound interest, Ben's 8-year head start on Arthur puts him past the 2 million mark at retirement. See the chart on the next page to see how all the numbers played out. The trick is, though, that you have to start right now. No matter how young or how old you are, all the time you have is all the time you have. You have to start where you are. So if you're under 25, stop thinking about all the time in the world. And if you're over 40, do not let regret keep you from getting this stuff going now. You have plenty of time left. It's never too late to start moving in the right direction. You see, building wealth isn't really a mystery. We said it was hard, but that doesn't mean it's hard to understand. The stuff I teach is actually pretty simple intellectually. It's just hard to do. That's because it's easier to just drift through life without a plan, wandering from one thing to another, to really build wealth. Though you've got to know where you're going and have the discipline to do the things it takes to get there. If you don't make a plan for your money, someone else will. Let me tell you how it happens. Say you fight to pull your $1,000 emergency fund together this month. You take that $1,000 to a bank and open up a new account. By doing that, you have turned the key on the most sophisticated and well-funded marketing machine in history. That machine is called the financial institution. They spend more money promoting their product than any other service or product in history, and they do a very good job selling their stuff. After you open that new account, you can expect to see a brand new Visa card magically appear in your mailbox. It will probably come with a note that says something like, "Welcome to the family. We're excited about building a strong relationship with you." Just what you want, right? A relationship with the bank. No thanks. You look through the paperwork and see that your new card has an 18% interest rate on purchases. And you say, "Nobody lends money at 18%. How stupid. They must be crazy to think I borrowed their money at 18%. And if you're like most Americans, you're saying this as you put the card in your wallet. And you think, "What a dumb idea. I'll tuck this plastic away in my wallet, though, just in case there's an emergency." And then over the course of the next month, the car breaks down. Emergency. And the kids are screaming for a pizza. Emergency. And then you realize that your children grew over the summer and need some school clothes. Emergency. And then some kid has a birthday party and needs some hunk of plastic from the toy store, or he won't feel loved. Emergency. All this stuff just rolls over and over. And a month later, the bill comes in the mail, and your jaw drops. You yell through the house, Who put $1,000 on the Visa? That was just for emergencies. What did we spend $1,000 on? You look around, but you don't see a new HD television or a new computer. You don't have a new wardrobe, and you didn't take on an exotic vacation to Hawaii. That $1,000 just disappeared. Life happened, and you didn't have a plan. Guess who had a plan? Visa. Here's what really happened in that situation. You took your $1,000 and loaned it to the bank at a 6%. If you got an excellent savings rate, then the bank loaned you back your $1,000 at 18%. That's their business. And as I said, they are excellent at selling it to you. It's up to you. This book is going to challenge a lot of what you might have always thought about money. It will certainly challenge everything you see and hear in the world about how to handle your finances. If you really dig in and do this stuff, you're going to be totally weird because you'll be going against the cultural current. You'll be taking a stand in practically every store, business, ad campaign, and most of your friends will try to convince you why you're crazy. I dealt with that a long time ago, and I'll be honest, that kind of pressure doesn't bother me a bit. After my wife Sharon and I went broke and started putting the pieces of our financial life back together, some things got clear in my head for the first time. I thought, who was it that taught me to borrow money? It was my broke finance professor. I was talking about that with a friend once, and he said, you know, a broke finance professor is like a shop teacher with missing fingers. That's when I decided that I wasn't going to take financial advice from broke people anymore. The bottom line is this. Normal in North America is broke. Normal is using credit cards, taking on a lifetime car payment, and spending more than you make. Normal is living on a razor's edge, where any unexpected emergency can send you in panic mode. I finally figured out that I don't want to be normal. Today my motto is, if you will live like no one else, later you can live like no one else. If you make some sacrifices, inject some discipline, and get intentional about winning with money, the future is wide open. You'll be blown away at the opportunities you'll have to serve and bless other people, and you'll be amazed at what life feels like without worrying about money all the time. It's a great place to be. If you're ready to find out for yourself, then keep reading. We've got a lot of ground to cover together. So before we get to the notes that I took on this chapter, we're just going to quickly take a look at the end of the chapter's key points and questions for reflection. Dave Ramsey gives us 3 key points. First, he says saving must become a priority. Then second, he says you must save for an emergency fund, major purchases, and wealth building. Third, he says decide and agree with your spouse on what qualifies as an emergency. If you don't have a spouse, it's okay. You can do this on your own too. That's what I had to do. Next, we're just going to look at Dave Ramsey's questions for reflection on that chapter. And these are just some things that you can take with you throughout your day and think about them as we move forward through this book. First, he says, what keeps you from saving? You should really think about where you are financially and look at your bank statement. If you see things that you're just spending so much money on, cut back on that. It can really help you in the long term and get you started for your future. Second, he says, why is baby step 1 the hardest step for many people? Is it that way for you? And honestly, I just think that a lot of people nowadays are so fixated on spending their money as they get it that they don't realize really the concept of saving money. It's just, is that how it is? I mean, that's just the way I see it. I actually got to this point recently where I saved up $1,000 in an emergency fund, and let me just say, it definitely does help you, and I feel really good knowing that I have money saved up. The third question he asks us to reflect on is, why do so many people use debt like credit cards, loans, home equity for emergencies? And honestly, I don't really know. If you have the opportunity to save money on your own and use your own capital to spend on emergencies, you should take that full-handedly. I don't really know why people use credit cards for emergencies. Honestly, I've always been taught credit cards should really just be used for like gas and food payments, um, just so that way you don't get overwhelmed. But yeah, I don't really know. Let me know what you guys think about this one. Fourth, he asks us, what does it mean to say that money is amoral? How is money like a brick? And I think he explains this really well with his comparison between money and bricks, where he says if you have a lot of bricks, it doesn't mean that you're an evil person. It just means that the bricks are associated with evil, which is honestly like how the world views money nowadays. They view rich people as evil and immoral people, even though like it's not always the case. Um, so I really like that analogy, and I think he really uses it well in his book. And then the fifth and final question he asks us to reflect on is what would constitute a financial emergency for your household? How would you cover such an emergency today? And I think this is a really good question because a lot of people nowadays would probably go and spend their emergency fund on things like their clothing for their kids, or like, I don't know, maybe they need food for the night, but going to a fast food restaurant instead of cooking what you have at home isn't the best way to go about this. You should always like not dip into your emergency fund if you can, because then you'll have it for the future, which is really what it's for, not for things like going out to eat or buying some clothes for your kids. You can use you should set aside a budget for that and not just use your emergency fund for that. Um, so with that aside, just that's what Dave Ramsey said, and I made some quick notes. If it repeats any of what he just said, then I apologize. But these were just what I wrote down after I read the book, what I thought about it. Um, so here are the key ideas that I got from Dave Ramsey, which he gives us to keep in mind moving forward. First, he says create an emergency fund. This will help you in big times of need, so you won't be stressing over that pops tire or broken phone. Second, pay off your small debts first and work your way to the larger ones. This is what he calls the debt snowball method. The opposite of this is called the debt avalanche, where you pay off your big debts and move down. Personally, I prefer the debt snowball method because in my head it just makes more sense to me. Paying off your smaller debts that are building interest and then moving up. But you can do your research into it and find what works for you. Third, save an emergency fund large enough to not have to work for 3 to 6 months. This doesn't mean that you save it up and then quit your job and like live off of this fund for 3 to 6 months. It's for things like COVID, where if you lose your job and you can't find a new one, it gives you that buffer period to find a new job and stabilize yourself, so that way you aren't living homeless or, struggling to get by while you're trying to get a new job. Fourth, invest in a Roth IRA. This is a retirement account that will collect interest, and it really depends on what account you get, but most of them you won't be able to pull from. But some Roth IRAs, depending on which one you get, will actually allow you to pull them out for, let's say, your first mortgage or your first home payment or down payment, which can be really helpful. So if I were you, I would just look into the different Roth IRAs that are out there and find which one works for you. Fifth, start a college fund for your kids. If you don't have kids and don't plan on having any at all, then create one for another kid. There are many kids out there with financial need who would really appreciate the opportunity to go to college. So think about the amount of kids that you could be helping. And not only that, but you're investing in the future. You could set aside that money for any scholarship you really want. If you want to invest in a kid who wants to go to medical school, well, you can help them out. And that just means that you're helping the doctor shortage in the future. If you want to help a kid who wants to become a lawyer, then you're helping like people who can't really have a voice. It's like investing in kids' futures is very honorable and a great thing to be doing. Six, pay off your home early. I don't really think this needs any explanation. It just helps you in the long run. You aren't having to pay a mortgage. Um, so yeah. Seventh, continue to build your wealth and donate to charities of your choosing. this is just a decent thing that I think every person should be doing anyway. But if you need a reason to do it, it helps reduce your taxes. It gives you a tax break. I just donate. I donate to my church as well as a charity that I really like. One charity that I would recommend that I donate to is called Feed My Starving Children, where they basically it's really a really cool charity actually. You can go to their organization and package food. They'll send it to places across the world that really need like food where they're just not getting it in many countries in Africa and places like South America and Mexico, and it's just a really great organization, and I would recommend donating to them. I've been donating to them for a little less than a year, but they're going to be a lifetime charity for me. Um, and just to finish off with this first chapter, if you like what this book has to say so far, it is called A Complete Guide to Money, and it's by Dave Ramsey. And just to let you guys know, none of the concepts in this podcast are my own from this book. And I'm not sponsored by Dave Ramsey, but I highly recommend looking into Mr. Ramsey if you need help financially. It's a really great book, and I would really just look into any of the other books that he has if you want to get an idea of how to start a business. He has a book called Entre Leadership, which I highly recommend. It's a great book if you want to really get an idea of how to get started in with business. And really quickly, I just want to make a note and say that any financial decisions made on your guys' end, I'm not liable for. It's these are just some concepts from the book, and I'm just making my own opinion on it. I am not a financial advisor, um, so please look into anything that you're going to do before you do it, and don't just take my immediate word for it. Uh, yeah, that's really all I gotta say about that. Other than that, thank you for listening to my first ever episode of Financial Fridays on the Reach the Stars podcast. My name is Dylan Caldwell, and I hope to see you next week.